Front Mission 2 features customization, some more customization. Oh hey, a battle! Welcome back everyone. Today we're looking at the Front Mission 2 remake, the second game in the series of tactical mech combat and customization. While Front Mission 2 makes some improvements over the gameplay of the first game in the series, it also has its own issues that could make or break the game for you, depending on what you like in your tactical RPGs. So let's start with combat first. The battle system really revolves around the action point system. Each unit starts with 7 action points and the ability to gain more later in the game. These action points are then used in movement and attacks like most games with an AP system. However, leftover AP is translated into an accuracy bonus during an attack. This means moving as little as possible before an attack can make the attack more effective. Furthermore, different weapon types use different amounts of AP. A short range attack uses 2 AP, a long range uses 6, and a melee attack will use none. Your unit positioning can also affect this AP system though. Being adjacent to an enemy will reduce your available AP by 2, while being at a diagonal from an enemy will reduce your AP by 1. If an allied unit is adjacent or diagonal from you, they will increase your AP by 2 or 1 respectively, up to its maximum. Of course, this all works the same for the enemy units as well, meaning effective strategy in Front Mission 2 will have you trying to surround enemy units to reduce their AP while keeping your units in a tight formation. If you can reduce an enemy's AP to 1 or 0, they won't be able to evade any of your attacks or be able to counterattack unless they have a melee weapon, of course. One other way to take advantage of the AP system is to use long-range attacks like missiles or rockets on an enemy first before moving into attack with short-range or melee units. This is because each of these long-range attacks will force the enemy to try and evade, which will use 2 of their AP each time. With enough long-range attacks, you can actually reduce an enemy's AP to 0 without even having to surround them first. I really like how this AP system is implemented. It adds a deep layer of strategy to the game, making RNG play less of a role. Granted, a big part of every attack is still tied to RNG, but you can use the AP system and other systems in the game to manipulate the RNG into your favor, which to me is the hallmark of any great RPG that uses any kind of random number generation. Aside from the AP system though, another aspect of combat is destructible parts, of course, because what is a mech game without destructible parts? Now, to me, this kind of system is a double-edged sword. Is it cool to take out the arms of an enemy mech, making them completely useless in combat? Well, yeah, but it can happen to your units too, and it's so frustrating when it does. A unit with no arms has no weapons, unless you have a body piece, of course, that has an integrated weapon. There are ways to combat this with using repair items to fix damaged parts, or even restore items to restore destroyed parts, but there is a cost to being able to carry these items. In order to carry these items, a Wanzer has to be equipped with a backpack that can hold them. These tend to be heavy and will reduce the evasion ability of your unit and how heavy of a weapon load that unit can carry. Then in combat, you'll have to get this unit to the damaged Wanzer in order to use the items on it. This means you'll probably want 2 or 3 of your Wanzers to essentially be medics. So while losing parts in battle can be frustrating, there are strategies to mitigate it, and once you figure out a good system, it isn't too bad to deal with, unless you just get plastered and 3 or more units lose their arms all at once. The last thing to mention about combat in Front Mission 2 is armor and weapon types. These can have a huge impact on your strategy too, and especially on how you customize each Wanzer, which we'll talk about in just a minute. There are 3 damage types in Front Mission 2, shock, fire, and pierce. In general, melee weapons do shock damage, flamethrowers do fire damage, and short-range weapons like machine guns do pierce damage. Missiles and rockets will do both shock and fire damage. To counter these damage types, some Wanzer parts will have a defense type to counter either shock, fire, or pierce, while many other Wanzer parts will just have normal defense with no special bonus against specific types of damage. A shrewd tactician could equip certain of their units with fire-resistant parts, for instance, and then send that unit after enemies equipped with flame weapons. Where the damage types will come up more often though, will be in determining which weapon to attack an enemy with. I usually try to have at least 2 different damage types available to my units, so that if I see an enemy is resistant to pierce for instance, I can use my flame weapon on him instead of my machine gun. So combat overall is really good in Front Mission 2, with a lot of different pieces to consider and work into a great strategy, and I didn't even mention how the different maps affect your choices either with city maps, creating choke points where it's harder to support frontline units, or jungles and mountains reducing movement, but also increasing your evasion chance. So while combat is great, every good mech game will feature customization. And boy does this one feature customization. Now, mech customization is very strong in Front Mission 2 with various things like armor types, weapon types, and mobility restrictions, as I've mentioned earlier, along with various paint jobs. In fact, you'll probably spend almost as much time in the menus upgrading and customizing your Wanzers as you do actually fighting battles. especially later in the game when you have many more units to customize. It isn't always clear which part is the best, as this really depends on what you are trying to do with a unit. For example, some parts will boast better overall defense, but are not resistant to any particular damage, while the parts that do specialize in, say, pierce defense, have less overall defense, but will do better against enemies with pierce weapons. You also have to consider the weight of each part and how much energy your Wanzer has. If you have an energy surplus, it will show up as your mobility stat. The higher this stat, the better the unit's evasion chance. So a heavier part might give you better defense, but you'll get hit more often. With so much to consider, it can take a while to customize each of your units for their particular role, and there will be new parts available after almost every mission. In the beginning, the customization and upgrading is really cool, but after 20 hours or so into the game, it starts to become a bit of a chore. This is because you'll eventually have so many units, and each will require attention in between missions, or they'll fall behind and become ineffective in combat. So if you really like the building and customization aspect, this may not bother you, but if you want to get on with the game and do the next mission, this may become annoying over time. With that said, one last aspect of customization is that of your actual pilots. Each pilot will level up and can gain new skills as they do so. These skills can then also level up based on how much they get used, and many skills relate to specific weapon types. Unfortunately, these skills increase level randomly rather than being based on how often they get used, so there is no way to really control skills other than equipping the ones that you like best. So rather than being an additional layer of strategy, they are more of a nice bonus when they do activate. So now that we've covered the major gameplay aspects of Front Mission 2, let's talk about the story. So the setup has a small team of Wanzer pilots fighting off a surprise attack on an OCU base by the Revolutionary Army of Alderash. Our heroes narrowly escape thanks to the sacrifice of one of their comrades, and from there they try to escape the country before being pulled back in to help their friends. Along the way, they join up with a local weapon smuggler to fight what is essentially a counter-revolution against the Revolutionary Army, all the while the OCU treating both factions as enemies. At the start, we see the conflict from 3 different angles as we follow 3 different Wanzer pilots until they eventually all meet up and fight together. As far as stories go for tactical RPGs, I've seen better. There are a lot of translation issues which Square Enix is working on, but even with the latest patch, I've still had some sentences in the text that just didn't make sense. What I can piece together story-wise though, when things do make sense, just doesn't really click for me. The whole plot is fine, but it really isn't anything special, and the dialogue doesn't do a very good job of making me care about any of the characters or their relationships. In fact, at one point, a character dies, and it wasn't impactful at all. I just really didn't care. Now again, a lot of this could be due to the bad translation and the fact that most of my playtime was before any patches were done, but I think the overall story is just there. I don't really care to play the next mission to see what happens next in the story. The only thing that really kept me going was the gameplay itself. So that said, I've written this review with about 70% of the game complete, which equates to about 40 hours of gameplay for me, and I probably won't be finishing it, because the story just isn't intriguing enough to make me care about what happens next, and the constant upgrading of all my Wanzers is starting to get old. I'm still having fun with the battles, and that honestly is the only reason I got as far as I did, but even that isn't enough to hold my interest anymore. So, if you're a mech fan and you love spending hours just customizing and optimizing and then seeing how your builds do in combat, then you'll get your money's worth out of Front Mission 2. But if you're looking for a great story, you can probably pass this one up. I hate to say this because the gameplay is really good, but the crap translation and overall storytelling just kind of ruins this one for me. However, if you want to see a great story, check out this video here, and thank you so much for watching this video. Have a great day, and keep on gaming.